One thing I've noticed from your website and your profile online is how much you've embraced social media and blogging and so on. And I must say, for anyone who hasn't read Kim's blog, it's very entertaining and worth checking out. Has that made a difference to your operation here? And do you find it cathartic? Do you find it a release?
It's one of those things. I was always very savvy when it came to social media or even media. I mean, going back to the days when I first started, I did brochures on a biannual basis. When we had open days in Lamb, I did brochures for that. I was always very conscious that people needed as much information as possible. And when things were going wrong for me in Northamptonshire, I really felt I needed to push something to keep my name in the press. I started a website in 1996. Certainly by that stage, by far the first person to have a website. And when things were going wrong, I realised a daily blog was something I needed to get into to try and just create interest. And I did that, and I put various things on there over the years, etc., which were inflammatory in many respects, just to make people come in there and keep things going. And then, when I came here, it was then a question of making sure that we carried on immediate work. And now I got a chap called Peter Kerr in to come and help me with syndicates, and syndicates backing off the back of the website was something that really got us going again.
Excellent, excellent. On to something slightly different. If you were in charge of racing for one day, is there any one or two things that you would like to do and change?
Well, there are lots of things that I'd like to change. First of all, I'd like to make sure that owners got a better chance of realising how their horse can have a chance of winning a race. Make sure the second prize money is stronger, so therefore you don't lose out the whole time. Make the handicapping slightly fairer, and make sure owners generally looked after when they go racing.
Okay, that's a lot. Would you mind describing a typical day for you, Kim? We met at just after 7 this morning and first lot went out. You go racing on a typical day. Can you just talk us through the times and what time you might get home and so on?
My day starts fairly soon after 5 o'clock when I don't necessarily crawl out of bed, but once I'm awake, I'm up. I'm in the office usually by 6, whatever happens. My head lad and I meet in here, we discuss what's going through the day. I blog then to make sure that the day's ahead. So whatever happens in my days then is preempted by what's happening. We work on the horses during the morning of the day, whatever it might be, then obviously you're going racing. The day doesn't stop until I get to bed, because at the end of it, even when I come back from racing, there's things to go and do, phone calls to make or emails to write. It's an important part of it. Life carries on, and I'm paid to do something which I do as a hobby, and it's a really important thing for me. And I'm very conscious that communication is important, especially with lots of owners. And Sunday morning, I will come in here and be on the phone or on my emails very early on Sunday morning, making sure everybody knows what's going on once a week.
Okay. I remember Kevin Prendergast, the flat racing trainer in Ireland, saying that when you have a good one, it's easy to get up in the morning, and when you have a really good one, it's very easy to get up in the morning. Do you recognise that feeling, that sentiment? Definitely,
and when I worked for Fred Ryman, so the trainer doesn't retire if they've got a good horse to look forward to. There's no doubt about it, when you come to a good horse, etc., it's very easy to jump out of bed.
Yes, I can imagine. Who would you say is the best horse you've trained?
I think the most interesting horses I've ever trained was obviously Alderbrook, because he's one I never expected to ever get to a situation where he had loads of problems. He was an extraordinary character. So I'd say most probably he was the best.
Okay. Attracting owners into the sport is very important for growing national hunt racing. Do you think there's anything that can be done to do that trainers or the authorities can do?
It always amazes me how some trainers are not necessarily good at making their doors open. I don't have a gate at the end of my drive for the very simple reason I don't want people to sit there and think, well, that's closed, I can't get up there. I think you have to be very open as to what you're doing and where you're going. There are an awful lot of people out there who would love to get involved in racing, just don't know how to go and do it. And until you meet them, you don't know. And whatever sport you happen to get, it's your friends talk about it, you get invited. And that's how, sadly, an awful lot of people get into it. Websites have made a very big difference, because at the end of it now, you don't do anything in life where you don't look at a website beforehand. You don't go and stay in a hotel in whatever country you want to go to without looking at their website. You don't even go to a restaurant most probably now without looking at their website. So websites are a hugely important thing. So again, social media has taken that sort of area off. And we used to do a brochure every single year for our open day. We still do, but I mean, it's not the be all and end all anymore, because it's out of date the day you print it. So that as long as your website's up to date, you've got an area which people are looking at.
Okay. One of the things I notice about your runners, they wear a noseband regularly, and I know I always spot Dermot Weld horses when they've got a noseband. Why did you start doing that? Is there a reason?
Oh, most definitely. I never forget it. I was standing at Worcester Racecourse, and I had 2 runners in the last race that particular day, and I think there were 22 runners on the race. In those days, they didn't cut back on the numbers quite as much as they do nowadays. And I could not see my horses. And there was one horse, the sheepskin noseband in the race, which was owned and was trained by Ian Balding. That was the only horse I could see. The following day, all my horses started running in nosebands.
Wow. Jockey-wise, you've had a successful association with David Bass. How did that begin?
Probably by mistake. And like everything in life, things happen through fate or by whatever monumental reasons that life takes a turn from one way or another. But I had a runner at Toaster on a bank holiday Monday, and Jason Maguire, who was then riding for me, got injured and couldn't ride. I went in the weighing room. There was a maximum number of runners in the race, and being a bank holiday, there weren't that number of jockeys in there, and there was really only one jockey in the room. And I hadn't met David Bass before, so I asked him to ride it, and we thought the horse would win. It did win, and he dropped his stick jumping the last, which is always a memorable moment. And so I expected him, because at that stage Jason was coming to the end of his career because he'd been injured enough times, and I expected David Bass to ring me up and say, "Can I come and ride out?" He never did. So I took that as a hint he didn't want anything to do with me. And then shortly afterwards the horse ran again, and I thought, well, as he won on, he might as well ride it again, and that's how we started, really. And then actually I made the bold decision to ask him to come and ride out, and I've been stuck with him ever since.
And it's been very successful.
It has been. It's been a good relationship, actually. We might not necessarily agree on a lot of things, but
it works.
It works.
Buying horses is a very important part of any operation. How far afield do you go, and how much emphasis do you put on buying horses and identifying horses at the sales?
Well, you can't do it without your, Lewis Hamilton would win a Grand Prix if the car wasn't quick enough to take him around there. He might be the world's greatest driver, but he's not going to win it in a mini minor. So the sales is where I go to buy horses. I love buying youngsters, absolutely love them. But it's a long-term project for everybody, and it's a very difficult time to sell youngsters, because at the end of it, you're not going to see them run really or show much for 2 years. Again, this is something where my syndicates have been really helpful, because at the end of it, we've got that hope dream of buying a youngster, and we get people together, and we sort of semi-lock them in for 2 years, so therefore they pay up front for 2 years, so therefore they're not getting the bills every single month worrying about whether they're going to see their horse run or not. Makes it easier for me to be patient with the horse, and easier for me not to get annoyed with the owners who pesters me about when it can run. And we've been lucky with that. There's been a lot of syndicate horses we've sold have now come on to be good horses because we've been able to give them the time. For an individual, it's very difficult. It's a bit like you, when you've made your money, you've had an ultimate dream to own a Rolls Royce, and you've got a couple of £1 million in the bank, and you finally walk into the sales room and say to that chap who's bought the Rolls Royce or selling you the Rolls Royce, "Here, sir, this is your Rolls Royce," and then he hands the keys and holds them on to them and says, "But you can't drive it for 6 months."
Yes.
So it's a difficult one. So I always advise anybody coming into racing for the first time, buy a horse with a bit of form beside its name, because you can go racing.
Sure.
Because when you make that decision to go racing or get involved in a sport, you don't need to be told you're not going to go racing for a year.
Okay. And finally, and a question that I'm sure a lot of our listeners will want to hear the answer to, your next winner is going to be?
Well, if it is going out tomorrow, then it's no good to anybody. I'm very lucky. I've got some particularly nice young horses here at the moment, and I've got a mare called Diva Raconte who runs in a novice hurdle, and the mare's novice hurdle shortly, and she won a bumper very impressively at Warwick, and came out in the second at Ludlow last year in a maiden hurdle, which was disappointing. But she banged her knee during the race and came back lame, and she's had time off as a result to get over that, and I'm really pleased with her, and she's a nice mare.
Sounds exciting.